What do you got for us as far as sports today, Pete?
John, I got two quarterbacks going in two different directions, and I thought we'd take a look at it because a lot of people have been talking about this. We were on this long ago. You can go back because this has been going on for a while now. We've been doing this show quite a long time. I can tell you this. Poor Bryce Young. And I say that because it's not Bryce Young's fault that the demand for him was as high as it was. Of course, he was trying to be the best quarterback he could be down there at Alabama, right? But the problems that I saw was he's very small. I didn't think that he had the cannon of the arm that some of the other quarterbacks did going into that draft. But Carolina, and specifically the owner of Carolina, Mr. Tepper, decided we want Bryce Young. So you know what they gave up for him, John, to get him? Well, they gave their best receiver, DJ Moore, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, 1 fourth-round pick. Chicago Bears did pretty well. I'd say they fleeced him pretty good on that. And they ended up getting a quarterback that maybe it didn't work out necessarily, but a quarterback that actually played pretty well, and he's looking decent, I think, right now at Pittsburgh. So, I think the Bears are feeling pretty good about the draft pick too, John, because they gave him the opportunity at least to go with Caleb Williams. So there's a lot of things out there that make this a very interesting sort of a move. And I feel bad for Bryce because it's not his fault, but obviously with all of that pressure that he's got on him, and now they're trying to figure out ways to get out of this whole thing, it's going to get ugly. By the way, the Red Rifle has taken over for him, only a 36-year-old quarterback from TCU. I mean, holy smokes, John. Carolina's got some major issues right now. On the other side, doing things well, same draft, how about C.J. Stroud? Now, here's a guy, John, that last year he comes to a team in 2022 before he was drafted that went 3-13-1. They had won 3 games, lost 13, tied 1. Last year when they had him, rookie year quarterback, they go 10-7. They go to the playoffs. They beat the Browns. Then they lose to the Ravens, who were arguably the best team in the AFC. I know Kansas City won it all, but the Ravens were pretty damn good, and they were rolling. But they did lose to Kansas City. So C.J. Stroud and this whole group, the drafting that they did as well, absolutely incredible what they did in terms of they beefed up their linebackers. They went to Alabama. They got an outside linebacker in Anderson. They got an inside linebacker in Tuo, who's a big stud. And by the way, this year so far, C.J. Stroud, 69% completion, got a few touchdowns. He's got no interceptions. I'd say he's doing pretty well. Last year, he threw 23 touchdowns against 5 interceptions. This kid is driven. He's a very religious kid. He's a really good kid. The team loves him. The city loves him. The NFL loves him. And he is kicking butt. And unfortunately for Bryce Young, it's gone the exact opposite way. I don't know. How do you fix it, John? Or if you're Tepper, what do you do with Bryce Young at this point?
Well, you're not going to get any trade. He's not a trade bait guy, Pete.
Right.
And you hit the nail on the head last year before the draft. And the draft was, of course, in 2023. Pete was saying, he's 5'10", and that doesn't bode well for an NFL quarterback. Not that you can't be. I mean, Pete and I are friends with Doug Flutie, and Doug would love to be 5'10". And he had a Hall of Fame career in Canada, did not have a Hall of Fame career in the United States in the NFL, but he played on several teams. And he is a tough now he's not so young, but a tough guy. And you have to be at, stature under, 6 foot. It is tough. And a lot of those quarterbacks that are under 6 foot have to run a lot. And this guy doesn't have the weight to carry himself in there. Look what happened to Tua, Pete. It's a question whether Tua will play again after all these concussions. And I think, unfortunately, David Tepper, who I think we both have a lot of respect for as a trader, but not as a GM. This guy has no business being a GM other than it's his money. So if you want to, David, go ahead and spend your money how you want. Let me lose my money like a man, to quote Clark Griswold. But yeah, and it doesn't matter. This is interest on his money, Pete. So it's no big deal that he pays this guy, and it's a rookie contract too. So you don't lose any big money on this. I mean, Jerry Jones, he's losing big money. Lamb And Dak Prescott, that's big money.
That's big money.
Pepper's not losing big money, but he has put his team behind the 8 ball by trading away all those draft picks. And those are the guys that you, A, build your future around, and B, are people that you can hold on to for 4 years before you have to pay them.
Yeah.
And then you have to sign them to those big, whatever, $230 million, $270 million contracts. But you don't have to in the first 4 years of their life as a Carolina Panther. So, this hurts, and it hurts Carolina's chances of being competitive for the next 5 years, probably, Pete. But, man, I don't know. Other than sitting them down, which they've already done now, I don't know what else you can do.
Yeah, and the leverage that you have when you can have those draft picks and what you lose when you trade all those picks for one individual is something that I'm amazed that it happens as often as it does, John. I'm amazed how much somebody might fall in love with XYZ. And, when you're doing it from the quarterback perspective and you're trading up the way they did, that also says, there's some statements about what kind of a team it was, right? And that team, unfortunately, is probably a team that was not all that great in the first place. They need all those draft picks. It's not about just a quarterback. A quarterback can be great, but you've got to have the other pieces as well. Because anybody ever heard of a guy whose name was Archie Manning? Go back and take a look. One of the best quarterbacks ever to come out of college. But his career in the NFL was not quite the same because they didn't have the people around him. You've got to have the people around you as well. All right, next up, John. I was just curious because we've been going into this, and it's kind of fun. 2 weeks in, 3 weeks into the season, college football. Who's the best team that there is? So it was Georgia, but all of a sudden you look at Georgia, you see what happened in Kentucky. They damn near lost the game. They did win the game, so they're undefeated still. But Kentucky, pretty good team, really good defensive team, and they shut them down. They absolutely shut down the number one team. They're no longer the number one team. Now Texas has taken that spot. And others have been moving around and shifting around and all the rest of it. So I thought it would be fun. Who do you think is the best team right now in college football? It could be Texas, maybe. I'll throw out two for you, and then you give me what you've got. I think Ole Miss is definitely somewhere in that conversation because they had a great offseason. I know it's college football, but it's still offseason. They had a great offseason in the portal. They did a great job recruiting kids out of high school. They've got an amazing quarterback. They've got, I think, a great coach, quite frankly, in Lane Kiffin. So that's one of them. I think the other one, John, that you can't look past, Tennessee. Heupel is a little bit nuts, the coach there, but he knows offense as good as any coach in all of football, and that guy's team is putting up points. Now, granted, it's against inferior competition, but you look at what they're doing from a scoring perspective and a defensive side perspective and the athletes that they've got at Tennessee, I don't know. I'd put Tennessee and Ole Miss right up there. Maybe they'd be 1A and 1B.
Yeah, they might be, Pete. Georgia, when this kid starts to hit, when their quarterback, who's a big kid, he's a Tom Brady kind of quarterback, I think, Pete. Yep. And I'm not saying he's the GOAT. I just mean, from what he does to lead that team and his stature and all the rest. That's the kind of quarterback that's got NFL prototype written on him. Much like what you and I said, I think, about Nix last year, Bo Nix. Last year at Oregon, that kid, he's a special kind of kid. And I'm sure Carolina would love to have him over what they got, Pete. But as far as swagger, nobody outswaggers Miami. So if I were to pick a dark horse, it would be those guys because they have a chip on their shoulder and they just play with a lot of gusto.
Well, they did a great job in the offseason getting a quarterback. That was phenomenal, and they look great. So I think you're right. And you know what? Give a little props to the ACC. They've got some pretty damn good teams over there. It turns out everybody wants to. It's just about the SEC, just about the Big Ten. I don't know the ACC. You can't just say these guys are out of the picture. I mean, there's some really good teams around the country right now, and it's I think it's going to make college football that much better.
Well, and the team that we both talked about at the start, Pete, which is still right there, is Ohio State.
Yeah.
They could line up with a lot of pro teams, and their payroll might be bigger than most pro teams. I mean, Ohio State, with the NIL money they're dishing out in Ohio, is pretty phenomenal. So games this weekend, I like SC Michigan. I think that's going to be a good game. But I think Michigan is not the Michigan team that we saw last year, obviously. It's not just the coach, but an awful lot of players left that team and went into the pros. And a lot of them will do really well. And unfortunately, the one that the Vikings got is going to not play till next year. But I think they've got a great program. But without Harbaugh to recruit, Pete, it's going to get tougher and tougher for Michigan, because it's always tough at Michigan and Stanford, two places that Harbaugh was. It's tough to recruit the athletes that can stay in those schools. That's not to say that Ohio State is just, it's a junior college or something. No, they got good programs, engineering and all the rest. But if you're trying to get athletes to get into and pass classes at Stanford and Michigan, that's a different level in my mind, Pete. So I think it's tougher to recruit there. So I think after Harbaugh's recruiting classes are gone, it's going to get a lot tougher on the coach.
Yeah, it will. And by the way, those Harbaugh brothers, we might have to talk about them, because one of them's 0-2 and one of them's 2-0 right now. And it's probably would have thought that one was the 0-2 is really 2-0 and vice versa. So a lot of interesting stuff going on in the NFL.